Hi, this is Derrik Jordan. Welcome to the World Fusion Show, where we bring you the leading innovators in world fusion music. Today, my guest is Christopher Adler, who is a khaen player and composer. The khaen is a very unusual instrument, will probably be unfamiliar to most of our audience. It's an ancient free reed mouth organ from Thailand and Laos. And Christopher is a wonderful proponent of this instrument, and I'm so excited to have him on the show to share this great instrument with you. Welcome, Christopher Adler, to the World Fusion Show.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's great. How are you doing today?
Very good.
That's great. I'm so glad you could join us and share this wonderful instrument. Now, it's so funny because this instrument, which is behind you on the right of the screen for people. Yes. Would you just demonstrate really quickly what it sounds like for our audience?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's very cool, right? So now, so the thing is that I was first bumped into this instrument myself. As a teenager, I was babysitting, which I used to do part-time. And there was this khaen, I didn't know what it was, as a decoration on the wall of this home I was at. And they left and I went out and I was curious about music. Even at age 16, I picked it up. I started playing it going, this is really weird. I like it a lot, but of course I couldn't play it really. But I thought, very cool. Well, of course, I never saw one again for like 40 years. I mean, it never bumped into it, but it's an ancient instrument that is very special because you can play chords and melody at the same time. So tell us a little bit about the background of this instrument and in the culture.
Well, sure. So it is a very ancient instrument. I think no one really knows how old it is, but at least thousands of years old, the idea of a free reed technology. So inside each one of these pipes, there's a little reed that does. And so it kind of works like an accordion. I play air, and like you said, I can play pretty much as many notes as I can cover up. This is an instrument of the Lao people, this particular configuration of a mouth organ called the khaen. It's an instrument of the Lao people who are in Laos and Northeast Thailand, as well as in other places. And it's it's a folk tradition. So this is by different people for entertainment, also for ritual musics.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I'd love you to share just a little bit about your background. Growing up, you grew up in the DC area, how you got into music, what got you attracted to music?
Well, I was playing music since as long as I can remember. And I do specifically remember in DC getting very interested in world music because it was everywhere. This was in the 1980s and it was on the radio and we could go to concerts at the Smithsonian downtown. And that's how I got into music from all around the world. So by the time I went to MIT as an undergraduate, I was kind of primed with an interest in I wanted to get more seriously involved in musical traditions from other cultures. And I was very fortunate at MIT that they started a Balinese gamelan ensemble when I was there. It was directed by Evan Zaporin. So that's what really turned me on to Southeast Asian music.
So you were playing gamelan with Evan Zaporin there. Yeah. He is actually going to be a future guest on the show. So I'm really excited to represent gamelan on the show as well. So now, you also were into playing pipe organ, you told me. And how did you use that?
Well, that's right. So my main instrument, I guess I sort of started on piano, but then I moved to pipe organ. So I became very interested in contemporary music for the organ. And that's, I think, one of the reasons when I first saw the khaen, it was immediately appealing to me because it is basically like a pipe organ that you play with your mouth. And when I first saw it, that was 1994. I had never seen anything like that.
Right. So you were introduced to the khaen when? When did you discover it?
So that was, it was the summer of 1994. I had just graduated college, and it was the Smithsonian Festival of American Folklife in Washington, D.C., and they happened to be featuring Thailand that summer. So they had artists performing in a number of different Thai traditions. And that was my first introduction to the classical music, which I think we'll talk about later, as well as to the khaen. And so it just sort of came at that moment when I was moving to graduate school and looking for a research subject, and things just clicked. I actually happened to find a khaen in a store in Durham, North Carolina.
Amazing.
And even more amazing is it was playable. Like all the notes worked.
That's
and
incredible.
Since then, I've never found one in the United States where all the notes worked. So it was just kind of like kismet. It just happened.
It's kind of a tricky instrument that way. It's kind of fragile, I think, right? You would say? Yeah.
The reeds are very delicate, and a lot of things can happen. I mean, the pipes can crack because of the climate. But oftentimes the ones that are on sale here, they're not even made well anyway. They're just like maybe at the one you saw, it's for a decoration on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. I still love the sound, and the whole thing about it is just a great thing. Now, I want to go to our first video because you're a composer and you write for the instrument and you work with different chamber groups in the San Diego area where you live. And I'd just love you to introduce this video for our audience.
Certainly. So I have a friend, Soo-yeon Yo. She plays Korean hagum, and she was coming to town to do a concert and asked me to write a piece. So I wrote this piece called K's Crossing, and it's basically like a jazz head. We have a kind of mixed meter, very funky tune that we play together, and then we take solos over a kopanica groove, which is that sort of Bulgarian 11/8 rhythm, and then we close it out. So I think the excerpt we'll see plays the tune and gets into some of the solos.
All right, let's go to the video. All right, we are back with Christopher Adler, khaen player and composer. That's really cool. I really like that a lot. Now, you, in pursuit of your interests in South Asian music, you made a trip to Thailand. And I think it was really a life-changing experience for you. Tell us about that.
Well, indeed. So like I said, when I started graduate school, I had opened up this kind of new research subject and just started with the khaen and started learning a little bit of Thai. And it was, I think, my really first serious international trip there in 1995 was my first research trip to Thailand. And it did open up a door on something that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I got very involved in classical music tradition, both in the Lao folk tradition. I've learned the language. My wife is Thai. We travel there all the time when we go there for bird watching and to relax also. So it's become kind of a second home, musically and sort of personally.
That's really great. So you were playing the khaen when you were there, right? And studying with people, probably, right? From various traditions or the same one? What were you?
The first time I sort of started teaching myself, basically, I used Terry Miller's book. He wrote a book about the khaen based on his PhD dissertation. It's pretty much the only source of information available, and some recordings. So I was teaching myself using that material. So when I first went there, I was able to basically show them that I could know a little bit. And so I was basically seeking out people to study with, seeking out a source of instruments. This was my first time to really just to get to know the lay of the land. And then 4 years later, I went back, and that's when I really got much more opportunities to make recordings that I could study and study briefly with teachers. But mostly I've been sort of learning from recordings and transcribing the recordings I make when I'm there.
That's great. That's fantastic. Now, you are a true world fusion artist in that you try to bring together various unusual, different kinds of world music that don't normally come together. And that's what we do on the show. This is what this show is really about, right? So this next video we're going to go to is an arrangement of a Swedish nickel harp piece that you're doing with violin and harp. Please introduce this for us.
Well, sure. So apologies for the pronunciation, but it's Nuaslotten by Ole Muller, who's a very well-known world music and Swedish musician. And this was just music that I loved to listen to on CD, and I figured I'd probably never, ever have a chance to play it properly. And so I just decided to make a transcription and work with the khaen and see what it could do, sort of bring it into a context where it hadn't been before for me. And I was already working with the harp player, Tasha Godinez, and then I invited my friend Batya McAdam Somer, who's a classically trained violinist, but also a very experienced folk music player, to come in. And so we did these tunes.
It's great. Let's check out the video right now. All right, we're back with Christopher Adler. Hey, that's very cool. Nice to hear a little Thailand, Swedish fusion there. I really like it. You, in your trips to Thailand, and you wanted to talk about what's going on currently with the khaen in Thailand right now. Is it being used in a world fusion way, or is it still mostly traditional?
Very much both. There's been, for a while, it was a little bit, seemed like the tradition was in danger of dying out. But in the last 20 years, it's been implemented in schools, and there's a generation of students who are really playing the traditional music seriously and improvising the way it's traditionally improvised. And then a number of them are also getting involved with various pop music, jazz groups, and fusion groups. So I feel like in the last couple of decades since I started, it's undergone a really tremendous resurgence.
That's incredible. That's great. And now, of course, you're maybe the biggest proponent of khaen composition here in this country, and working with various kinds of groups, trying to really get people to learn about this wonderful instrument. And I know you're commissioning works by other people. You're trying to encourage and work with other people to get more and more interest in this instrument, which I think is just fantastic because, well, everyone should know about it. So now I'd love to go to our third video. And this one is you playing with an instrument called the JK, you said, right? Tell us about this.
Yeah, so the instrument you'll see is called jake, and it's a Thai classical instrument, and it'll be played by Supina Insi Adler, who's my wife. And this is an instrument from the Thai classical tradition. So it's a tradition that developed in the Thai royal courts, very different from the folk tradition of the khaen. So although you're seeing two instruments from ostensibly the same country, they're not typically played together. They're in different tuning systems. So we're going to play a classical melody called Oksum Lao Pan, which is it's a little fast ending tune.
Cool. Let's watch the video. Thanks. All right. That is really, really cool. Really like that a lot. That is so great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Christopher Adler, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today on the World Fusion Show. It's been just great for you to share your music and your love of the khaen. And it's great to have more Southeast Asian music represented on the show. I'm really trying to get more of that. Also, now we get to go to the part of the show where you and I get to jam together, play together. And I'm really looking forward to that because I love the instrument. And anyway, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's been wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care now. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, this is Derrik Jordan. Thank you for joining us on the World Fusion Show. It's been great to have you. We've got lots of great shows coming up, and, we're going to do lots more cool stuff. Always something new and different on the World Fusion Show. In this case, ancient and different, but we're going to keep going and just keep bringing you more great stuff. We've got, please share this episode with your friends, follow us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and help us spread World Fusion music far and wide. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Mackenzie Family Charitable Trust, Dean's Beans, Chris Pratt, Nancy Feinberg, Ron Dans, and Jeff Green. Thank you so much for your generous support. And remember, as we always say, think globally, listen locally, and support independent music.